The corridor outside Advanced Potions was thick with summer heat and leftover fumes. Something vaguely sulphuric still clung to the walls. Ella Montgomery tugged her sleeves up as she stepped into the hallway, her robe slung over one shoulder and hair sticking to the back of her neck. "I see you've survived Snape's final attempt at psychological warfare," said a voice beside her, low and smooth and far too amused for someone who'd nearly set his own parchment on fire. Fred Weasley matched her stride without missing a beat, hands shoved into his pockets, his shirt rumpled in a way that somehow looked deliberate. "Typical Barley," Ella said, brushing soot off her elbow. "Though you looked like you were one ingredient away from a loud obituary, I had everything under control," Fred solemnly. "My cauldron was simply expressing itself. Exploding is not self-expression," Fred raised an eyebrow. "Says you. I like to think I brought some much-needed drama to the dungeons." Ella gave him a side glance. "And how, exactly, is that different from any other day?" Fred gasped. "Are you implying I'm dramatic?" "Fred, once you staged a funeral for your own lost sock." That sock had character, Ella, she shook her head, smiling in spite of herself. This was how it had always been. Fred tossing out nonsense like confetti, and Ella catching just enough of it to throw back. It was easy, familiar. The kind of rhythm you fall into without thinking. As they climbed the stairs toward the common room, the castle around them buzzed with that strange, restless energy that always came at the end of the year. 1 week left, 7 days of pretending everything was normal before everything scattered. Trunks, owls, promises to write. "So," Fred said, stretching the word out like a new idea, "what's your schedule looking like this evening, Miss Montgomery?" Ella shit him a look. "Wise. No reason," he said, to casually. "Just thought I'd extend an exclusive invitation to a very small, very private post-potions gathering." "In my dormitory, for one," she raised an eyebrow. "And by gathering, you mean?" He leaned on slightly. "Just me, you, a bit of green, and a window open just enough not to get caught." She huffed a laugh. "Don't pretend this is some formal invite. You ask me every other night." "Correction," Fred said, holding up a finger. "I offer you the privilege of my company every other night." "It's different." Ella shook her head, but she was smiling. "So you're suggesting we slowly cook ourselves in your dorm, blow smoke out the window, and mock the Gryffindor 4th years until we forget the world in ending?" "Exactly." He slung an arm around her shoulder for a second, brief but familiar. "Our sacred tradition." She leaned into him just long enough to make him stumble. "Fine. I'm in." Fred looked triumphant. "I'll roll, you bring the snacks." Ella scoffed. "I'm not your house elf. You are when I'm high and hungry." He laughed, teasing her. Ella shot him a stern look. "I will hex you." "You say that every time," he said cheerfully. They reached the portrait hole, but neither of them moved to enter right away. A wave of warm air drifted past them from a cracked window nearby, carrying the muffled sounds of laughter. For a second, Ella just stood there, staring at the worn stone floor. Fred noticed. "You good?" She hesitated. "Yeah, just weird, isn't it? Everything almost being over." He was quiet for a beat. "Yeah," Ella glanced at him. "You think it's gonna feel different? Next year with all of it?" Fred looked at her, a flicker of something thoughtful behind the usual brightness in his eyes. "Probably, but different doesn't have to be bad." She nodded. Right, and just like that, he bumped her with his shoulder again. "Anyway, you, me, and our regularly scheduled detour into questionable decision-making," Ella snorted. "I'll meet you after dinner." "Excellent." Fred dropped into a mock bow. "I shall prepare the ambience." "You're not lighting any candles." A smirk grew on his face, which she knew was dangerous. "Too late, I already stole one from the library." "Fred." But he was already through the portrait hole, leaving her shaking her head, half exasperated and half smiling. Same old Fred. Later that night, Gryffindor boys' dormitory, Ella knocked twice, sharp and quick. She didn't wait for a response. Just pushed the door open with the side of her hip, balancing a bag of honeydew sweets, a tin of leftover biscuits, and thick navy blanket she'd nicked form the common room sofa. Fred was already sitting in the floor between his bed and the window, legs stretched out, wand held lazily in one hand as he fiddled with a self-lightening tip of parchment. The smell of weed was already faintly in the air, earthy and warm. He looked up and grinned. Montgomery, as always, your timing is impeccable. I come bearing gifts, she said, kicking the door shut behind her. Fred made an exaggerated show of bowing for where he sat. You're a legend, you know that. Ella dropped the sweets and blanket onto his bed, then slid down beside him onto the wooden floorboards with a soft sigh. She rolled her shoulders out of her jumper and pulled her hair into a loose knot at the top of her head. You already started without me, she said, nodding toward the barely smouldering joint between his fingers. He held it up innocently, pre-flight checks. Fred offered it over to her without ceremony, and she took it, taking a draw slowly. They'd done this so many times it barely needed words. After late practices, after shit classes, after the kind of days that dragged at your insides. It wasn't about getting high, not really. It was about quiet stillness about them. He took it back when she passed it over, holding it between his fingers like it belonged there. You know, he said after a moment, I've down the math, oh no, and statistically we've spent more nights like this than we have revising for actual exams. Ella gave him a lazy side eye. We'd be worse off with revision. I've seen you try to memorize things. I retain important information only, Fred said proudly. For instance, you always steal the red jelly beans, you hate licorice ones, and you pretend not to like fizzing whiz-bees but always eat mine anyway. They fizz in my teeth, Fred. It's distressing, but you still eat them. They're sugar-coated betrayal, she said, reaching into the bag and pulling out exactly that. Don't psychoanalyze me. I wouldn't dream of it. The room was dim, just a soft floating orb of light above his bed and moon outside, spilling across the floor in slanted stripes. There were books in haphazard piles, mismatched socks on the end of George's bed, a cracked exploding snap card stuck to the wall. And in the middle of it all, the two of them, sitting hip to hip on the floor like they had every right to take up that space. Ella leaned back on her hands and let her head tip against the edge of his bed. Feels weird, what does? This time of year everyone pretending it's normal when we're all about to leave again. Like we're not going to be completely different people next year. Fred took another hit and exhaled deeply toward the open window. Yeah, that was one of her favorite things about him, she realized. Not the jokes, not the chaos, not the grins he gave like secrets. But the way he could be quiet, like he didn't need to fill the silence unless it meant something. You think things will change? She asked. Softer now. Between us, I mean. Fred didn't answer right away. He didn't look at her either, just kept watching the smoke drift upward, like he was considering it properly. I don't think we could ever stop being us if we tried. That made her smile, quiet and involuntary. You're just saying that because I brought snacks. Exactly, Fred said, turning to smirk at her. I can't afford to loose you. Who else knows my favorite snacks and my precise blanket preferences? George. Fred looked scandalized. How dare you? Ella laughed, let her head tip back into his shoulder for a moment before lifting it again. They passed the joint back and forth until it fizzled out, both of them stretched out on the bed staring up at noting. Fred lets out a long, contended sigh and dropped his head back against the bed frame. My bones are soup, he declared. Your bones have always been soup, Ella said, digging in the snack bag. You're held together by spite and sugar, mostly sugar, he murmured, eyes half closed, and raw charisma, Ella grinned. The air between them had settled into a thick, sleepy warmth. A perfect mix of smoke and moonlight. It felt like a bubble, one that might float there forever if they didn't move too fast. She popped Aymar biscuit into her mouth, chewing slowly, and then sat up a little straighter. A thought had drifted across her mind. Half-formed but thrilling in the way only very late, very high ideas could be, you know, she said suddenly. If we win the match this weekend. Fred cracked open an eye open. If. When, she corrected. When we win, I think Gryffindor should throw a party. Fred blinked at her like she just invented fire. Ella Montgomery, are you suggesting a full-blown, dorm-shaking, Filch-hurrying after-hours rager? She smirked. I am suggesting a celebration Quidditch tradition. Tradition, he repeated solemnly. Well, when you put it like that. How could I possibly say no? I'm serious, she said, nudging him with her foot. We deserve it, it's the last match of the year, come on, we deserve it. Fred was quiet again, but this time it was thoughtful in a different way. You're right, he said eventually. sitting up with a creak of the floorboards. Let's do it. Big party, common rooms and booze. Acquired by morally flexible means. Loud music, some unfortunate dancing, maybe even a banner. Oh, absolutely a banner, he grinned. You're going to make it, aren't you? I've already started designing it in my head. Fred gave her a lazy salute. Captain Ella, keeper of the vibes, I like it. She tried to play it cool, but something about the way he said it, light, teasing, but just a bit proud, made her chest go warm. Well, she said, brushing it off with a stretch and a yawn. You'll owe me when it goes down as the best party of the year, Fred yawned as well. I'll write a sonnet in your honor, please don't. Oh, I will. With rhymes and everything. There once there was chaser named Ella. Of the next line is anything about your wand, I'm hexing you, I mean it. He gave her his most innocent look. It was going to be, the world was much better with Ella. Honestly, Montgomery. So quick to violence. She rolled her eyes and tossed a pillow at his face. Good night, Fred. He caught it one-handed, grinning night elves. She slipped out quietly, blanket in hand, the idea of a buzzing party somewhere behind her like static. Something to look forward to. Something to hold on to. She didn't see the way. Fred watched the door for a few extra seconds after it closed behind her.